Book of Revelation, chapter 3. Point is verse 10. We'll probably start at verse 5 and it reads. Let's start at verse 3. Revelation 3 and verse 3. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. Thou hast a few names even in Sardis, which have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. White meaning purity. White can also mean innocence. I forgot where it's at, where it talks about giving the white stone. He that overcometh, he that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment. And I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He that have an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write these things, saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, he that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth and no man openeth. I know thy works, behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Verse 10, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon it, so I get to try them that dwell upon the earth. And that's pretty much when, everybody's going to be presented with the, I won't call it an opportunity, but you're put in that situation if you're going to, accept, the MOTB, because again, they're going to create a system where you're not going to be able to, maneuver or navigate the system without, that MOTB. That Haragma, verse 11, behold, I come quickly, hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown, which is the truth, That's why we go through our different trials and tribulations, the Lord is building up an endurance for the suffering, what's that in Peter, talking about the fiery trial, which is alluding to, that our temptation as well. We all go through different tribulations, with all of it set to, harden you for the ultimate hour of temptation, when you presented with that micro C-hip. Verse 12, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my power. And you go into an overcometh, pretty much become a champion. And he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my power and the name of the city of my power, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my power, and I will write upon him my new name. He that have an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. Church means to call out, or Ecclesiastes. That's deep too, because I was listening to the elders go to how it won't be no prophets in the kingdom because all the prophecies are going to be fulfilled, So I want to start off by giving all praise, all honor, and all glory to God, Elohim, Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushai, Hashem, Kodash, double honor to the elders and to the apostles. I learned this truth from. Peace and salutations to Akim, across the four corners of the earth, pushing the truth with faith and with sincerity, as well as risking their lives, as well as the freedom to do so now more so than ever. Shalom to the Akim and Aqua that listen and learning, Lord willingly, this is edifying. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners scattered abroad in the land of other nations, appearing like the other nations, but whom subscribe to this truth. To you, I say Shalom. Brother Yahweh, coming at you with another lesson through the Spirit, through the power of Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushai, Yahweh, meaning He is, He exists, or He to be, by Hashem, by His end, Hazdash in His name. Yahushai, meaning He saves, or He delivers. True names of the Most High God and His Son, who these people ignorantly call God in Jesus Christ, but whose true name in the Paleo Hebrew is Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushai. That's weird. Anyhow, I didn't want to do that, but I think that's Revelations chapter 2 and 7. Because somewhere in there, 2 and 17. the white stone, right? Because I wouldn't looked it up, and when you go into the ancient Roman, courts system, pretty much, white stone represented your innocence, and black stone represented guilt. That's why when you read Revelation chapter 2 and verse 17, it talks about he that have an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcome will I give to eat of the hidden manna, the hidden bread, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it. Um, but this lesson is inspired by basically I was watching the guy Andre. I think his name is Jeek or something like that. Not trying to butcher his name. And I found out something that like the elder say, you miss a day, you miss a lot, or just showing you how you always should be. I'm gonna try to incorporate some of that because the one brother from Jersey was going into how the dopamine and pretty much the social media and how really kind of making you zombified. So it's things that that pertain to the truth that we can stay rooted in and locked in. With like for instance, I didn't even know that the Clarity Act hasn't truly passed. Which we all know the Clarity Act has to do with pretty much the stable coins and pretty much the digital dollars and whatnot. But they say they're using digital or stable coins, but they're not. Clarity Act hasn't passed. Matter of fact, let me bring it up. It says the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act has not gone into effect because it's not yet a law. While the House of Representatives passed the bill in July 2025 and the Senate Banking Committee advanced it in May 2026, it still requires full Senate floor approval, reconciliation with the House and the President's signature. So it was passed in July of 2025 and it advanced, but it still hasn't taken effect. Now, like I said, again, they say that they're using stable coins. And when you understand the stable coin is pretty much like a digital dollar that can be accessed on, any smart device or any computer, and a lot of people don't understand uh, how dangerous this is because it's pretty much you got other countries that's, in particular Russia, that's nervous because of the fact it's a way for Babylon the Great to actually get rid of its debt, So, all this debt that Babylon the Great has, what is it, like 42 trillion or something like that, by creating these stable coins, basically it's a way for, different nations of people to actually invest in Babylon the Great and take on the debt. Another one of Esau's, what is it? How does it go? The vices, or the wiles of the devil. Well, what was I going to get? So I was watching the dude Andrew Jenkins, and he because basically Russia or Putin and them pretty much has created their own digital ruby, which you got Moab that got a digital, what is it, a digital yuan, So it's more than just one country that has these digital dollars, I don't know how the Lord's going to set this up, but, the whole point is like he makes a statement, pretty much he's saying the future of money is going to get away from the West and it's going to be, because you got too many people that want to put their hand and have their hands involved in it. Like a lot of these companies is going to be dealing with these digital dollars. Instead of coming from the banks, it's going to be coming from the corporations. So again, which is showing you who had the power the whole time. You got these corporations that basically pay lobbyists to push forth, legislation that benefits them. So let me go and play this copyright disclaimer in there. I'm gonna play some of the. This is just a few. I mean, it's like a 20-minute video, but I'm not gonna play the whole video. I'm gonna play. I just had that. I'm gonna play parts, sections of it. Fair use. Bear with me for a second. This is copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit, educational, personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So now I'm about to play portions of this video, which I don't see how that's not playing. There we go.
So the CEO of the biggest bank in America was just asked whether the dollar will stay as the world's reserve currency, and here's what he said.
If America is in a weakened state, and this is important too, like if we have to destroy its military in 25 years and destroy its economy, we won't be the reserve currency either.
And if you're familiar with any of this, you know, if you up on your square, you should know that that's that guy Jamie Dimon. Some people call him Jamie Demon. And it's funny because it was a quote. I found a piece of paper because, you know, I'm always writing down lessons, or I used to, be honest. But I used to write them down, you know, pieces of paper or whatnot. You know, I might have came across an article, so I'll write down the title or something like that in order to go into a lesson. I never went into this lesson, but I came across a piece of paper that I wrote down pretty much the title or whatever, and then went into Jamie Dimon, and then went into something Trump said. He said he was the president pretty much set up for the reset. Now, if you look this up, you can't find it. So I don't know, maybe I'm not wording it correctly like the elder. He always, the elder, he like to, you know, he you know, you gotta tweak it, you gotta finesse it, you know what I mean? So you gotta corner the demon, I guess. Which I get what he means. Say what he say, you gotta cut off the rain.
So his two conditions are military and economy, but I think there's arguably something even more important than that. It's about whether the rest of the world's money still has to flow through your economy. And that brings me to what happened this week, because a couple days ago, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, signed a 287-page law. It's called the Federal Law on Digital Currencies and Digital Rights. It was signed on August 4th, so effectively this means Russia just legalized crypto. It is their version of the Clarity Act. Now the question is, why would Russia do this?
I'm not going to play the whole video, but it's an interesting video because, again, he goes into pretty much, it's like a chess move against what Babylon the Great is trying to do with the dollar. And like I said, pretty much my whole point of playing this is to show you like you know, how he's going to go into Moab or China and, you know, these other countries pretty much dealing with a different kind of currency, you know. And pretty much how, you know, the West is going to, you know, that's why he said what he said, you know. But again, I suggest, you know, you watch the video and get your own perspective on it. Well, I mean, again, he kind of sums it up and explains, you know, again, the way the stable coin works, again, you don't have to necessarily be a citizen of Babylon the Great, you know, because, again, anybody that has a cell phone, you know, you can basically get access to, you know, a stable coin. Kazak, be quiet. So
there's two theories. The official theory is because this is a story about a nation's access to money. Here's Vladimir Putin's explanation of it.
Much in the same way as Russia, they might suddenly find themselves cut off from their legitimate financial assets currently held in dollars or euros at any time. And they could also lose access to the entire Western financial payment infrastructure. We all fully understand that this is fundamentally about unfair competition. No? The excuses they provide can vary, but they will always find one, like the ongoing conflict in Ukraine in our case, or a conflict in the Middle East in another instance. The various conflicts across the African continent, or even the way they treat the LGBTQ+ community. Look, they are always going to find fault with anything.
So he's basically saying that
You talking about Babylon the Great because again they had a, because of the SWIFT system, and the sanctions, they could pretty much sanction you if you did anything that they didn't like. What did that devil say? Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who make their laws. Again, and that's why they want to create a system like this where pretty much everything is digital because again, it's kind of total control. You'll think twice before you buck the boat when it's going. Your decisions can affect. If you got paper money, you can put something to the side. You can save, but with these cryptocurrencies and this digital the CBDCs rather, with these CBDCs, it's programmable, so they can give it to you and they can take it away. They can make it where it doesn't function. Like the elder goes into the 15-minute cities, which again, just like these data centers are popping up everywhere, these 15-minute cities are popping up everywhere. The state of Ohio is building a lot of data centers. They got some of the largest actually. I was going to do a lesson on. I was watching a video earlier, so again, this is not meant to be extremely long. I just want to get this part, and then I'm going to go to a specific part, and then I'm going to bring out the rest of the few scriptures that Spirit gave me. So,
if and when the U.S. wants, they will always find any reason they want to put economic pressure on a nation. So this is Russia's way of clawing back its access to money. Okay, how? So when a company in one country sells something to a company in another country, the money moves through a sequence, like your bank, to a bank that has a relationship with your bank.
If you need cash now, just go to Lengo. All you need to do is answer a few quick questions to see how much you'll get. It won't affect your credit score or your mortgage. And you don't even need to put in your social. Plus,
through a sequence, like your bank, to a bank that has a relationship with your bank, to a bank that has a relationship with that bank, and eventually to the seller. And in most of those chains, no matter where in the world you are, they'll end up passing through a U.S. institution somewhere along the way. That connection point is what's called a correspondent account. It's the most important thing in international finance because whoever controls that account controls whether your trade happens or not. And Russia lost access to a lot of those chains in 2022. Now, Russia still has oil, it still has gas, precious metals, and food, and all the other things that other countries want to buy. The problem for Russia is getting paid. That's what this is. It's what's called a bearer asset. And
like I said, as you can see, like I said, that SWIFT system pretty much allowed Babylon the Great to control, these other countries from actually making money. Now, the thing is, when the BRICS nations was formed, that allowed them to bypass the SWIFT system in order to still, because basically they're making transactions and trade with each other. But you hear what he's saying. He says Russia's pretty much trying to get back into the world market, because again, all these currencies are going to end up digital.
Settles between two parties without a correspondent bank sitting in the middle deciding whether to allow it or not. The crypto law says if you're a Russian company importing or exporting and you want to settle a contract in crypto with a foreign country, this law says that you can do it. There's no limit on the transaction. You can even do it wallet to wallet if you want. You just have to report it and pay taxes on it. Now, hold on. Why would Russia go through all this trouble to build something legal and licensed instead of just using some shadow banks or some crypto, right? Well, here's why. Because if you try that, the U.S. will cut you off. In fact, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, just made an example of Iran and what would happen if you don't follow the rules. He said, quote, Iran's shadow banking system is buckling under economic fury, and the regime is running out of ways to move money. Every facilitator that keeps the regime afloat is putting a target on its own back. Treasury will continue to expose these networks and cut them off from the U.S. financial system. End quote. Okay, very interesting. What does that mean? What it means is the United States is cutting any country, company, or person out of the U.S. dollar system if they allow sanctioned countries or businesses to go around them. That is why, a couple days ago, the US Treasury put out a list of a few names. There were a couple people, there were a handful of companies, and what all of them had in common was they moved money to help Iran. Hundreds of millions of dollars on the behalf of an Iranian bank in multiple currencies across at least 4 countries. And they did this using a series of shell companies. So the US found out, and now it's cutting them off. So the US is basically saying, either comply with the system and play by the rules, or you don't get to play with others. Now, if you're a sanctioned country, like Russia, you want to make sure that you still have the technology to allow your country to trade with others, regardless of whether the US allows it or not. That's why Russia's passing their own version of the Clarity Act. That is the official understanding of it. The unofficial theory, though, I think is a lot more interesting. So in today's video, I want to share with you a very plausible theory.
So again, I'm about to skip because he's going to go into these different countries that's pretty much going to be dealing with money.
Settlement side, by the way, which is the unlimited part, that's technically not investment demand either. Nothing says that Russia has to buy and hold Bitcoin. That's just Bitcoin being used as a settlement layer, kind of like gold. Money goes in one end, it moves across the border, comes out the other end, and it gets converted. So unfortunately, I can't give you some price prediction. Anyone telling you that this is why Bitcoin's going to go to $150,000 or higher is trying to sell you something. But here's where I think this is way more important than the price. I think the important thing is to pay attention to which direction the world is going in. And I think where it's going is away from the Western system of money. There are now multiple competing implementations of how we move money. There's, for example, something called BRICS Pay. There's China's CBDC, which might be backed partially by gold and a basket of other currencies. There's Russia's CBDC. There's going to be a lot of technologies for
And as you can see, it says stable coins, dollar. And again, when you look it up, it says they're being used today. So, eventually it's going to be a system where everything's going to be digital. When you go into this video, he goes into how they're going to, pretty much they're only allowing the Russian people to buy a certain amount of this digital rupee. I think they said $3,700 worth, but they're not allowed to spend their, they're not going to be allowed to put their 401k in it, or they're not going to be allowed to spend more than the $3,700. Show you that all these governments are going to be in cahoots with pretty much a digital system of control.
Transporting money from point A to point B. That is the system that is now evolving. And while it's evolving, there are very powerful players with leverage and real access to capital that want as much influence as possible over that new system so that they don't become irrelevant when it gets here. In the US version, for example, the state won't issue the money, right? It's going to be the corporations. That's why companies like BlackRock and Larry Fink, that's why they want to manage their reserves. The banks want to make sure that Apple Coin is not going to pay you higher interest rates than your savings account do, because that's where banks get a huge amount of their leverage from. Now, the crypto companies, they want a seat at the table. They want to become the new banking system. Russia wants to protect its influence in the world. China wants to maybe take the influence away from everyone else and make it so that the concept of money is not tied to statehood or any nation. So there's all these different competing versions that are going to replace the old system. And unfortunately, nobody in this room is arguing on our behalf, because we're not a player in any of this. We are what's called the deposit base. I did a separate video.
All the fact that literally, like you said, all these countries are making central bank digital currencies, which are all programmable.
I go into a lot more detail about the US Clarity Act, what it does, and more specifically about who it's fighting for power over it. And it's very interesting, so go check it out. If you want to know more of my thoughts on the economy.
So, scriptures talk about, a time of great testing. Let's see. In fact, let me get. I'm gonna get Revelation chapter 13, because pretty much, it's the book of Revelation chapter 13, and starting at verse. Let me just get to the point, verse 16, and it reads, "And he, who is he, this so-called white man, Esau, Edom, the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark or a charagma in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that have understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666." It's deep, because think about it. Who is the individuals that came up with this whole, when you had the jump shot, and the whole CVID, what is it? 6 feet distance, 6. Yeah. And it's going to be a huge test, That's what, again, the scriptures talk about that hour of temptation. Because, again, can you really think about this? I was watching the one brother from Jersey. He did a lesson, and he was going into people losing the Section 8, And, again, it's not like they're not going to give them the funds to fight this war in Iran, What is it? 1.5 trillion, I already did a video or a lesson on it. They said pretty much it's going to pretty much be a tax onto the American people. There's an extra 4,000. That's what they do. They tax the people, on top of the fact where the people are already exhausted, already squeezed to the point of what they say. What's the saying? You can't get blood out of a turnip, But the devil is still attempting to, while the American people was struggling, this man was still trying to build this ballroom. I'm talking about, can't make it up. This is the book of 1 Peter chapter 4. And that's one of the reasons why the Lord, takes us through our different trials and tribulations, to build up that endurance, to build up that callous, that, to make you long suffering, because the Heavenly Father, is long suffering, It says, share the sufferings of the Mashiach. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 12, "Beloved, thinking not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. But rejoice in as much as ye are partakers of our Mashiach's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy." And like I said, again, it made me think it's Revelation chapter 2 and verse 17, because it went into that, he that overcometh will receive that white stone, which basically that's pretty much, how's it worded? Pretty much acquittal, So these people, again, the scriptures talk about a great persecution in the book of Matthew chapter 24. I think it's 24 and verse 21. Matter of fact, even in 2nd Ezra chapter 16, it talks about how they're going to pretty much be persecuting the men of the Lord. Matter of fact, let me get it. This is the book of 2nd Ezra chapter 16. I'm probably going to end it with this, and I'm going to start at verse. Let's start at verse 64. "Therefore hath the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua exactly searched out all your works, and he will put you all to shame. And when your sins are brought forth, ye shall be ashamed before men, and your own sins shall be your accusers in that day. What will ye do, or how will ye hide your sins before the Most High's angels? Behold, the Most High himself is the judge. Fear him. Leave off from your sins and forget your iniquities, to meddle no more with them forever. So shall the Most High lead you forth and deliver you from all trouble. For behold, the burning wrath of a great multitude is kindled over you, and they shall take away certain of you and feed you, being idle with things offered unto idols. And they that consent unto them shall be had in derision and in reproach and trodden under foot. They're gonna have people that's gonna comply, thinking that's gonna benefit them. And in the end, like you got these sellout, churches that pretty much, don't want to bring out the true name. They don't want to, they don't want to, it's certain things that they figure is controversial, or they, because they hoping that these things will benefit in that day. But again, this devil is recording and monitoring everybody. Like yeah, that's some probably probably won't. How would I put it? Probably won't be targeted like that. Like the elder constantly brings out the Southern Poverty Law Center, and then pretty much how they were caught funding, the KKK. So although the KKK was supposed to be being monitored because they're considered a hate group and yada yada yada, at the same time, behind the scenes, they were being paid. What do you think they were being paid for? Because when when the lights go out, what do you think they're going to do? Again, when mayhem and turmoil and judgment and judgment, goes forth, again, just like these Idumeans, these Edomites is pretty much attacking Jakes. That's why the elder brother from NC was saying, you need to be praying when you lead, especially now, because again, like the Lord got Jake being touched, you know what I mean? Like to the point, like this is how bold these devils getting, it's not to the point where they, lighting crosses on your front yard. But I mean, best believe when, those race riots come, these Idumeans coming, you know what I mean? Because the Lord gonna have a spirit on them. It says, verse 69, and they that consented, I read that part. Verse 70, for there shall be in every place and in the next city a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. They shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua. For they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses. Then shall they be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as the gold in the fire. And I was listening to a particular brother because he was going into, I mean, if things are like this now and we ain't really even turned up, just imagine, again, things ain't even really like, it ain't even at this, it ain't at its apex, you get what I'm saying? Like it's, we in the beginning of the sorrows, and you got people losing their mind just now. So just imagine when, you starting to feel, I was listening to Camper Brothers. And he was going into that. He was like, think about this. We haven't even, seen he was going into how Babylonians, these Americans, pretty much haven't experienced some things that these other countries have. He was going into like maybe something get destroyed over there, they village, but they alive. So they just grateful to be alive. He was saying, a lot of these people ain't even familiar with the fact, a lot of individuals ain't even never been, homeless. We ain't even talking about Esau Edom being in poverty. We talking about homeless, actually having to rely on somebody else to provide for you, And I learned a lot from that, like hell no, it's not a fun and comfortable feeling. But I'm glad the Lord allowed me to experience it because again, it's like something my brother used to say. He always said that he believed that a man should actually experience being like incarcerated. He was like, because, a lot of people don't understand how that feel to actually, like you pretty much like the position you put in, like you pretty much put in a child position, you can't do shit without going through these people. You know what I mean? Yeah. Being told when to get up, when to go to bed. You're a grown ass man. Can you imagine that? So the same is with like pretty much not having the ability, because a lot of, that's a humbling experience. I was listening to the brother he was going to today. He said a lot of people, he said, you can't be proud and pain. And then he rethought it. He said, you know what? This probably is a proud ass motherfucker. Babylon. I seen proud people homeless. So yeah. But he revisited it and he said, well, hungry. And if you've ever missed a meal and couldn't provide or couldn't get the meal, or yeah, That's a very humbling experience. It's funny. I was just with the guy that I was speaking on about. We both was homeless at the same time, and the Lord blessed us both to basically get up out of homelessness. And pretty much, him and his lady had bought some food, and he left the food, so they was gonna throw away the food. You know what I mean? So we had a event, put it like that. We had an event, and I knew nobody touched this food. The food still tied up and everything. So I went and got the food because I had to go past the area. Now they willing to throw it away, but I'm like, I can see if like the funny part is he said something like when we was homeless, he said he would have ate it, but we was in way worse conditions. I know ain't nobody touched his food. Now I wasn't gonna eat the food, I was gonna get the food away. You know what I mean? Like just so happened where I stayed, another guy that was homeless, or he would be he kind of be in a gas station near where I stay at. And so I was gonna give it to him. But the point being, my point of what I'm making is the pride, because he was, and I was just thinking like you sitting up there, you tripping on me, but I'm tripping on you, like because things is about to get worse than what it was when we was homeless. Like the programs and the what's the word, the aid and whatnot that they had back then is not even, that's none and void now. They don't even have that. A lot of the programs, it was a particular church that we would go to. I don't even think that church does this anymore. So again, I was just like, people, he thinks he's more humble, but if anything, I looked at it like you more proud. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, I mean, I ain't saying you got to give it to, you got to eat it, but I'm saying like, wouldn't you give it away? And I know for a fact, anybody touch this food, like, you got a bunch of bougie mother, like say, like but like I said, when we was homeless and the situation, you around motherfuckers spitting and smoking and drinking and you know what I mean, motherfucker might pissed over where you left your food at, you know. Mm. Like I said again, maybe it's just me, you know what I mean. Like I said again, I mean, I never had to eat out of no trash can. The Lord blessed me in that regard, you know what I mean. Yeah, I never had to eat off the ground or shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest, I gave away a lot of my food because my demon was pregnant at the time. So I was missing meals because she needed to eat for more than herself. You know what I mean? And that was humbling within itself because she used to, she bougie and shit. She want to, really wasn't that fucking, shelter food, you ain't want no soup kitchen food, You thinking you supposed to be getting, Salakia for the rant and just getting people funny. Uh, Back in Second Ezra chapter 16, and it says verse 73, and then shall they be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as the gold in the fire. And you can look at pretty much that hour of temptation is gonna be like when that fire is the hottest, you know. Verse 74, hear, O ye my beloved, saith the Lord, behold, the days of trouble are at hand, but I will deliver you from the same. Be ye not afraid, neither doubt, for the Most High God is your guide, and the guide of them who keepeth my commandments and precepts, saith the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, power. Let not your sins weigh you down, and let not your iniquities lift up themselves. So, you stay locked in, trusting in Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Again, I'm sure every brother that goes out on the highways and hedges has some testimony of the Lord coming through. I got a whole year. It's funny because I was thinking like, so Jake must think that, so your mindset is, Satan was just, the one that's sustaining me. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I went through a whole year of losing the job like every other motherfucking month, if not every month. I'm probably exaggerating, but I'm talking about like motherfucker. I don't even know why. Not calling nobody motherfucker. What I'm trying to say is I didn't even know why I was getting fired. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. I work at a job where you got to be kind of fast doing this. And guy said I was moving too slow. But ain't nobody said I'm moving too slow at this job. Or, you know what I mean? So it's just like how the one elder brother from Boston was saying. He was like, it'd be the spirit on you and the spirit on these people, you know what I mean? And, these people that got demons on them, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they don't, But you know what I mean? That's why it's gonna be a great persecution. But the Lord, again, the Lord really rocking with you, if He with you, if you have the hopeful elect, the Lord gonna see you through these things. I mean, that's a testimony coming from, again, I'm glad the Lord, and it is ugly and lonely, and at the end of the day, I did this to myself to a degree, but at the same time, did I? Or was this always my lot? I could accept my lot, I just don't get tired of hearing everybody's opinion on certain shit, what I'm saying? We all got one, but that don't mean it's right, That's why the scriptures talk about it's a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living power, May the Lord be with his, his elect, because it's all about the elect and the prophets, like the elder said, that the prophet is the most highest man. So if you're so-called black, Hispanic, because we about to come into them times where shit, your faith is about to completely be tested. They got this technology they utilize. We being watched, monitored, surveillance. You know what I mean? And then you got to remember the Lord gonna try you. So if you're so-called black, Hispanic, Native American, Seminole Indian, West Indian, or Haitian, I implore you to come back to the laws, statutes, and commandments of your power. True name in the Paleo Hebrew is Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, or you will be destroyed. What's that? Romans chapter 13, it said, knowing the time is high time to wake out of sleep, because our salvation is nearer than when we believe. They said that Russia pretty much is going like they passed the law, but they said, I guess it goes into effect on the September 1st. Like that's around the corner. And if they push theirs, you don't think Babylon the Great gonna push theirs? I mean, again, I didn't even know the Clarity Act wasn't completely passed. So, yeah, I'm gonna end the lesson there. If you're so-called black, Hispanic, Kazakh, be quiet. If you're so-called black, Hispanic, Native American, Seminole Indian, West Indian, or Haitian, I implore you to come back to the laws, statutes, and commandments of your power, whose true name in Paleo or Hebrew is Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, or you will be destroyed. With that, I want to give all praise, all honor, all glory to Yahweh Bashem Yahushua Bashem. Double honors to the elders, to the apostles that learned this truth from. Peace and salutations to the Akim, across the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth with faith and with sincerity, as well as risking their lives, as well as their freedom to do something now more so than ever. Shalom to the Akim and the Aqua, thought they're listening and learning. Lord willingly, this is edifying. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners throughout the world. In a land of other nations, appearing like the other nations, but subscribe to this truth to you. I say shalom. Until next time, Lord willingly, shalom, shalom. Kwame Yashrala and Allah, love you.